I usually prefer to shelter when Halloween comes around. I've had years where just going down to the costume aisle of the Walmart's enough to spoil my whole week. I don't like the masks. My grandfather is one of the sweetest men I've ever known. Just please keep that in mind with some of what I'm going to tell you here. He looked after me when my sister was born and my dad had to go back to work. He was a tall man with decades spent tending crop and livestock. Grandfather was strict, but he knew when to be gentle. When I burnt my hand on his wood stove, he rushed it under the tap and spent the next hour telling me stories until I stopped crying. The day I had to rejoin my parents and meet my baby sister, I remember him choking up a little. He said I could visit whenever I wanted, and made me promise I'd keep his girls out of trouble. I think I was 5 at the time. When my parents wanted to take a vacation for their 10th anniversary, Granddad made the 2-hour drive from his 119-acre farm to our cramped suburban home so he could watch after us. What I remember most about the goblin mask was the smell. Sharp and acrid, like Dad's old work gloves, like the discount costumes at the thrift store. He tried to get my sister to wear it and only stopped yelling at her once I started crying. I'm sorry, I thought you liked Halloween. He made us pancakes the next morning as an apology, but mixed up the salt and the sugar. After that first day, the mask was placed in the hallway on top of Mom's antique dresser. Its long, muddy green ears drooped like reeds drying in the sun. Matted synthetic hair stuck out of the ears and the chin. The mouth was a wide-fanged grin of solid rubber. None of us talked about it. My sister kept her eyes shut when she had to walk past it. The eye holes are the part I remember clearest of all. From its perch, the eyes would glare down the hall whenever we left our rooms. Getting up at night for the washroom meant walking past the mask. It meant having your back to it. The mask itself had eyes in its design, but where the pupils should have been, there were holes punched out. When Grandfather wore it, his eyes would catch the light and glint. An animal glint. An eye shine. He did wear it again. The night before my parents came back. The night before Grandfather slinked back to his farm and out of our lives. The night I saw Grandfather tapping his gnarled fingers against the wallpaper. Lean limbs snapped with each movement, clicking bones gave away the presence of something in the hall. The mask, its fine hair glowing in the moonlight, its fanged grin. In any other context, his 2 long arms and fat belly would have been funny. Were they not now lurching through the dark? He wasn't quiet either, muttering and cackling up and down the hall, back and forth, naked but for a pair of underwear. Back and forth. I couldn't let him see me. Back and forth. I didn't know why, but I couldn't let him see me. Back and forth. Stop. Grandfather glanced over his shoulder and bent his legs and arms before stretching his branch-like limbs upward. His fingers laced together, skin stretching taut over the vertebrae of his spine. Every joint popped as he let out a high-pitched whine. He didn't look away from me once. This was over a decade ago, but I'm sure I remember the next part correctly. He reached his fingers into his mouth, the mouth of the mask, passing beyond the teeth and down its throat. The small thing kicked and squeaked as Grandfather held it by its tail, brown fur and whiskers barely visible in the dim light of the hall. The rat thudded to the floor and scurried into the dark, fleeing the goblin as it laughed. I couldn't see a seam where the mask met his neck. I told my parents what I could the next day. Mom got really mad at him. Dad took us to the diner in town while Mom and Grandfather stayed at the house. When we got back, he'd already left. The diner pancakes tasted salty. I remember there were rats in the parking lot.